In Newcastle, Australia Day started with a religious celebration. Political, business and community leaders watched a presentation in Christchurch Cathedral of symbols of our nationhood. The service also paid tribute to the many who courageously battled the recent bushfires. Symbols of their toil and heroic efforts were also displayed. On Newcastle's foreshore, the tributes continued. The successful efforts of picketers who fought for 18 months to keep Wallsend Hospital opened were honoured by Newcastle Council and State Government. 94 Newcastle residents became Australian citizens. Assisting with the presentation of certificates, Newcastle's Australia Day Ambassador Yahoo Sirius. Across the water, Stockton also celebrated. Their activities took on a multicultural theme featuring Tongan dances. Activities around the foreshore will continue well into the night, but the ceremonies don't stop here. Throughout our region, people have been celebrating our National Day. Port Stephens folk took a relaxed approach to Australia Day. They indulged in an Aussie breakfast, followed by a thong-throwing contest. At Cessnock, celebrations were led by Justice Marcus Einfield. Then the city's givers and achievers for the past year were honoured. Judy Wilson was named Cessnock Citizen of the Year, 12-year-old Brock Parks Junior Citizen. During Maitland's Australia Day service, personnel who tirelessly fought the recent fires were individually thanked. But for Karen Markham and partner Brad, no ceremony could have emulated the birth of their son Mitchell, the region's first Australia Day baby. He's a Lake Macquarie sailor battling to make his mark in one of the lesser-known sailing classes. 24-year-old Steve Smith sails the Olympic Fin class. While he may lack the fancy equipment, his talent abounds. Steve is ranked 5th in Australia, his ultimate goal to compete in the 96 or year 2000 Olympic Games. But for now, it's one step at a time. Currently, he's preparing for the national titles that will be held at Wangi next month. With the majority of the regattas held in Melbourne, it's a pleasant change to be on home waters.
In Melbourne, it's normally a lot sort of bigger waves, and Lake Macquarie's a bit flatter. It suits my sort of style of sailing, and I enjoy it there.
So you think you might have a bit of an edge?
I hope so. It's good to get one back on the Melbourne guys.
A strong performance next month and throughout the year could see the Wangi resident make the Australian team for the world titles in 1995. But achieving this is costly. Steve invests around $8,000 training and competing each year. In the lead up to the national titles, Steve is hoping to find good form and a sponsor. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
While the bushfires are our most recent experience with flames, fire is a phenomenon that's fascinated Tim Storia for years. This exhibition spans 2 decades of his work. It explores his fascination with fire and the Australian landscape, influences that came from a lonely rural childhood in the state's central west.
He's painting images of isolation and alienation, which he's felt from being alone in the New South Wales countryside, and the Australian landscape has influenced his work very strongly, and he's painting about man's helplessness against the nature of the Australian country.
But after travelling overseas, Storia found that sense of isolation isn't exclusively Australian.
He also travelled to Egypt, where he was very strongly influenced by the same feelings of isolation in the Egyptian desert.
10 of Storia's Egyptian-inspired work Australian pieces. The exhibition continues for another month.
The American Sudan team of John Soares, Scott Bloomquist, Charlie Swartz and Clint Smith blamed the first two defeats on mechanical problems. They had no excuses going into the third test as the cars were all in tip-top condition. This enabled them to narrowly defeat Australia 39-33. Early in the night, however, it looked like Australia would make a clean sweep of the series. By the second heat, Australia were comfortably 6 points ahead of the visitors. Problems started for the Aussies when Don McEwen clipped the wall. It got worse as Bob Brewer withdrew with brake problems. The only victory for Australia on the night was John Pine breaking the track record with a time of 101.696. Americans Bloomquist and Swartz returned home today, while their two teammates will stay in Newcastle for the International Masters on Saturday night. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
It was a novel mix, America coming to the aid of our Australian bush. For the next 2 days, around 90 sailors have volunteered their leave time to help clear ground cover and create fire breaks. During the recent fires, 20% of blackbutt reserves were destroyed. The sailors' generosity giving the rebuilding process a kick-start.
It's greatly appreciated because this area like this wouldn't normally get cleared out till winter time.
Is it hard work?
No, I come from woods, so I was raised cutting trees and all that good stuff. So.
Maybe not hard, but some were feeling the heat. This group's assignment was to plant 500 eucalyptus trees to establish a food plantation for the koalas.
That would work there, probably take normal people a couple of days to complete at least, and they're just so keen. I can't get over the keenness of them.
Do you think we're going to have a few sore sailors tomorrow?
I think they'll feel it when they get back on board ship tonight.
As a thank you, a sign will be erected nearby acknowledging the crew's contribution. Over at the New Aviary, work was underway preparing the koala site.
And these are what it's like being overseas as a sailor. You really enjoy the things you see.
And there was an unexpected surprise. For these sailors, this was a first-time experience. Their questions ranging from how big do koalas grow to how do they cool off. Catherine Lamond, NBN News. It was back on home turf for Trudy Musgrave after winning the Australian Open junior singles title at the weekend. The tournament's 11th seed, her efforts far exceeded the quarterfinals berth she had set her sights on. Understandably, the 16-year-old from Newcastle took a while to control her nerves when stepping on court for the final, facing top seed Barbara Schett of Austria.
Yeah, I was very nervous at the start. I got down 3-love, but then I thought I've got nothing to lose, so I just thought I'd go for it because I was the underdog in the tournament, really.
Trudy won the match in 3 sets. Her more fancied opponent ranked 136 in the world professionally. The gutsy left-hander now qualifies to play in other junior Grand Slam tournaments, the French, US and Wimbledon. But first, Trudy will spend a week next month training at the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra and also play the Australian satellite tournaments. Around May, she'll travel overseas for several months with the Australian 18s touring team. Due to start Year 11 this year, Trudy has decided to study by correspondence, leaving more time to concentrate on a tennis career.
I hope to go into the Opens, probably try and get a ranking this year with the satellites, and then I'll go from there, try and work it up. So by the time I'm out of juniors, I should have a decent ranking to do well in the Opens.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Just after 7 last night, a 22-month-old boy was found at the bottom of the family swimming pool at a home at Orange Grove near Woy Woy. The little boy had found his way into the pool despite safety fences. Ambulance officers attempted to revive the child, who was pronounced dead on arrival at Gosford Hospital. Earlier in the day, a 13-year-old girl at Point Clare suffered an epileptic fit in a backyard wading pool. She was revived by family members. The girl was transferred to Camperdown Children's Hospital, where she's now in a stable condition. And on Saturday night, another toddler was dragged from a backyard pool at Ourimbah and revived by his parents.
The shark catch attracting most attention was this 434-kilogram tiger shark caught by Lake Macquarie's Mal Farmer on Benra. This catch gained Mal the titles of heaviest shark of the tournament and champion angler. Mal also hooked a 330-kilogram tiger shark, that catch taking him 15 hours to land. He also took out the Best Boat Award. The heaviest marlin category was won by Brad Compton. Matthew Temperley's dolphin fish catch winning the heaviest other fish section. And David Litchfield on board Neptune won champion tag and release. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The trial game served a number of purposes: a chance for the new players to get on terms with established members of the team, and an opportunity for players like David Mullane and Robbie McCormack to build some confidence after injuries in 1993. And the Rockhampton players didn't miss any chances to test their opposition out. But first they had to catch Matthew Wadwell, time and again the halfback left his opposite number clutching at thin air. Tony Butterfield is still travelling like a train on a downhill run, his tough work laying the base for a Mark Glanville try. Knights new by Russell Wire grabbed 2 tries, one of them straight from the Juggler's Handbook. Not everything went the Knights' way. There was the occasional mistake under pressure, and Rockhampton did manage to get over the line on a pass that down south would make a linesman even look twice. At one stage, the score was clicking over so quick the scoreboard operator didn't know which numbers to grab next.
We played some good football. We also played some stuff that we weren't that happy with, but all in all, it was a good result.
After the game, Rockhampton's coach was convinced his players weren't whitewashed.
As far as commitment goes, we weren't lacking. I think it was 100% commitment, and that might sound a strange thing with that scoreline, but the fact is, when you're playing a Winfield Cup side, we were stronger, faster, and in every sense of the word, well, you're not going to win the match, but I was happy with the effort, yeah.
Nothing built after 1977 gets a start. These cars are all classic British, American, old Holdens and racing hybrids kept going strong by enthusiasts. There are the rare models such as this 3-wheeled pre-war Morgan. It has a 2-cylinder air-cooled engine and 2-speed gearbox and was revived by a Sydney owner from a rusting relic. 250 competitors raced 31 events over the 2-day program. 1960s MGBs featured well in the competition. Father and daughter, David and Brooke Walker from Bullaroo at Lake Macquarie, poured hours into their car and enjoyed good racing early, only to suffer a frustrating engine breakdown. Dick Willis from Coffs Harbour performed well in a Lancia Ford V8, as did father and son Brad and Pat Golding from Belmont in Notas. Tamworth's Graham Hill impressed in an Austin A35.
Schizophrenic Adam Reid died in April last year after he shot a policeman at Nelson Bay and then turned the gun on himself. At the time, his condition was being supervised by a community mental health nurse who had 60 psychiatric patients to care for in a large area of Port Stephens. At Reid's inquest, the coroner acknowledged the nurse's dedication and her considerable workload. Dr Smythe has announced that one extra nurse will be appointed to share the work in the Port Stephens area. A psychiatrist is also visiting the area 2 days a week. Adam Reid's father, John, told NBN he didn't think that was adequate. President of the Schizophrenic Fellowship, Pat Sneesby, agrees. Pat Sneesby says the Burdekin inquiry identified considerable problems in the provision of care for the mentally ill, but action is still required. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
"16 months ago, Alicia Jenkins was sitting at home watching the Barcelona Paralympics. Now she's on her way to competing in the next Games.
Nothing will stop me from doing anything. I believe if you want something bad enough, if you try hard enough, you'll achieve something.
That's what the 21-year-old has done, following a challenge from her brother to have a go. Alicia suffers from Ellis-Van Creveld syndrome, a disease which stunts growth. At the age of 10, Alicia reached 122 centimetres or 4 foot in height. She was to grow no more.
I don't let anything stop me. I am only 4 foot, but that's nothing.
It's that attitude that's seen Alicia win almost every event she's entered, as well as setting an Australian record last year. Under the watchful eye of former Olympian Donna Proctor, Alicia is preparing for the national disabled titles in April and then the South Pacific Islands Championships in China in September.
It'll be my first major international meet, so it'll be interesting to see how I am to other people in the world.
Donna Proctor believes Alicia has the ability to be a champion. The problem is the university student may not be able to afford to get there, her travels requiring self-funding. All this aside, Alicia wants to give something back to swimming. She plans to establish a regional office of the State Sports Council for the disabled.
Get them involved in sport, give them an opportunity to achieve something that they never thought possible.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
A task force group including Deputy Premier Ian Armstrong and Member for Waratah John Price met Senator Ray and Parliamentary Secretary Gary Punch in Parliament House. The group is in Canberra to encourage the Minister to think favourably on a bid from Newcastle to win work in the billion-dollar contract.
Gave us some indications of support that were warming to the committee that came up this afternoon.
All the three tenderers for the work have mentioned they'll support Newcastle in the contract to build 6 mine hunters for the Royal Australian Navy. A decision is expected in June-July, the Deputy Premier emphasising it would be a great boost for the hunter.
With $1 billion project over, say, 6 years in Newcastle, it would really be very important for employment, for the development of new technologies, new firms, and, of course, new skills.
It may be a far cry from the man-made rowing lakes of Barcelona, but Newcastle Harbour's industrial backdrop is just as unique. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the harbour was filled with rowers. The recent formation of the Newcastle Rowing Club means the coal loaders and carriers will once again tower over the narrow racing canoes.
As far as we can find out, there hasn't been any rowing regattas on the harbour since about the early 30s, so this is a brand new sort of reincarnation of rowing on the harbour.
48 different events will be held on Sunday, with more than 200 rowers from as far north as Port Macquarie. The Underwood Cup will be repolished for the regatta. It was last awarded to a rower for winning a contest in 1902 on Newcastle Harbour.
Well, there seemed to be a community need for rowing. I think there's amongst the community here, and we've certainly found it since we've opened the club, that a lot of people rowed at school, and once you've rowed, it sort of gets in your blood, and they're all sort of dying to do it, but there's been nowhere for them to sort of come down and have a central spot to row.
Races will range from male and female single sculls up to four-person teams. The 900-metre course will begin near the Boat Rowers Hotel and finish at the Port Hunter Sailing Club. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
Phil Moore and Rod Dickinson have always been interested in sport. They used to work from home, assisting amateur sports people and motivating busy career-minded professionals. But over the last 18 months, their business, Infinite Fitness, has proved so popular, they've had to expand into the city.
You've got a broad spectrum of clients that come to us, from professionals, dentists, accountants, solicitors, through to housewives, athletes that haven't been able to sort of get the results that they may want to achieve, and basically people that may be disillusioned with the gym scene, if you like.
According to Rod Dickinson, there's no doubt we're becoming a more fitness and health-conscious society, but for people over 35, it's often difficult to get into a routine.
Having the one-on-one trainer enables us to take them through the program that we individually give them and give them the advice, continually.
While some people like Jenny and Janet prefer to work out in a private gym, others choose to walk or run. According to Rod, it's whatever suits the individual. He admits personal training can be a little pricey, but he believes it's definitely the way of the future. The discovery that HIV was spread from one patient to 4 others in a Sydney doctor's surgery has caused concern about infection control. But it's not just the medical community that does procedures which penetrate the skin. Tom Denham is a member of the Professional Tattoo Association. His shop in Newcastle uses an autoclave to sterilise the instruments, a method which has just been endorsed as the preferred means of sterilisation for reusable instruments.
Autoclave sterilisation is a very important part of it. We sterilise our needles, the tubes that they run in. We wear rubber gloves, mainly for our own protection.
While some people are being careful, others may not be. The skin penetration guidelines were drawn up in 1991. The Health Department is now conducting a review to see if people are actually following those guidelines.
We're concerned that conditions such as viral infections, hepatitis, the HIV infections are ones which can be spread by blood contact from one person to another.
The Health Department is doing a statewide survey of premises which do a range of procedures involving piercing skin, as well as the obvious tattoo shops and acupuncturists. Hairdressers, beauty therapists and barbers will also come under the spotlight.
It's mainly through accidents, I guess. If a person gets a cut on the skin with the use of a razor, for example, then it's important that the razor is cleaned and properly sterilised in the event of the same razor being then used on the next person who comes into the barber shop.
Alternative therapists may also be included in the survey, which will be done at random by health officers. The information will also be used to determine whether the guidelines themselves need to be changed. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Cessnock coroner Darryl Field was this afternoon shown around the site at Pelton, where the naked body of Alison Newstead was found on October 13 last year. She was reported missing by her family 6 days earlier. Police prosecutor Sergeant Phil Lloyd told the court that a post-mortem examination and toxicology test had failed to determine a cause of death. However, more sophisticated tests were underway, which had the potential to discover the presence of amphetamines. Called to give evidence today was Roderick Duncan Rankin of Bellbird. Sergeant Lloyd asked that Rankin be bound over as proceedings against him, including 5 counts of supplying amphetamines, were listed for hearing at the end of March. He asked that Rankin not contact any of the witnesses appearing before the inquest. Sergeant Lloyd also presented to the court this letter received by Alison Parker, a friend of Alison Newstead. Fingerprinting had been unable to determine its authorship. The only person to give evidence today was Detective Sergeant Tony Hetherington of the Newcastle Homicide Squad. He told the court that an application would be made for a reward for information to help determine the circumstances of Alison's death. He said it was the view of investigating police that Alison Newstead, who was an asthmatic, died sometime between the evening of the 6th of October and the early hours of the 7th of October, and that her death may have been a result of some type of reaction to her administration of a drug such as amphetamine. However, there is no direct evidence as to who would have supplied the drug, what persons were present, and what person or persons were responsible for the disposal of her body. During the next few days, Police Prosecutor Phil Lloyd intends to bring up to 35 witnesses before the court, including medical experts. The inquest resumes tomorrow morning. Jodie McKay, NBN News. Radiotherapy is a useful tool in the war against cancer. The radiation which kills cancer cells either cures the patient or, in the case of the terminally ill, can relieve their pain. The trouble is, the demand for this treatment has outstripped the Mater Hospital's resources. A waiting list for radiotherapy has presented doctors at the Mater with an ethical dilemma. Should the priority be patients who can actually be cured, or to relieve the suffering of someone who's dying?
It's difficult because these are the real issues of life. How do you rate someone's years of life in front of them as more important than someone else's quality of life for perhaps a shorter period of time.
The hospital has decided to put people like 37-year-old Cape Camphorst at the head of the list.
I came down immediately and started the radiotherapy.
Kate has breast cancer, but with treatment her chance of survival is promising. Other patients who are dying are being pushed to the bottom of the waiting list.
At the moment we're prioritising curable patients above those that are incurable.
More staff and another linear accelerator, as it's known, would shorten the waiting list, but Dr Hamilton says it's unlikely the extra equipment will be bought.
It's likely to be a recurring thorny problem for the next 2, possibly 3 or more years.
Playing on familiar ground last night, Newcastle University and the Maroon Tops went into bat first. Having lost their first wicket for just 7 runs, opener Robert Faraday moved the tally to 78, only to be run out. Enter captain Glenn Grimmond. His stay wasn't long. On the very next ball, he was caught behind for a duck. Reece Soper didn't face too many more balls. With University on 3 for 80, he also walked. Soper being Brendan Wolf's first scalp. Wolf's figures for the match 2 for 29. University finished the 30 overs on 5 for 201. Eastern Suburbs couldn't match it. They were all out for 101. Catherine Lamont, NBN News.
Described as one of the state's most serious forms of land degradation, soil salinity has been recognised by the government as potentially disastrous.
The rising salinity levels in our soil is something that must be arrested. Our plan is to do so by the turn of the century. If we don't, we'll have saline soils and we'll have a very much reduced range of land use capability, particularly with cropping.
In the Upper Hunter, 7 projects working towards minimising and controlling the problem will benefit from the New South Wales Salt Action Task Force grants. At Muswellbrook Council Chambers today, $54,000 was presented to 4 land care groups representing those committed to land conservation.
The fact that the landholders are involved and the voluntary contribution that they can therefore make, I think produces projects 4-5 times the value of the financial contribution paid in by the government, and I think it's one of the great success stories in terms of environmental management, at least for the last couple of decades in this state.
For the next few months, motorists will be forced to dodge construction work underway through the heart of Muswellbrook. Last year, Council embarked on the first phase of the $3 million project, reconstructing the road and changing traffic lights from William to Hill Street. Now phase 2 has begun.
Also widening of the road and taking the crossfall from about 12% back to 4.5% crossfall, which will also alleviate the stress on some of the high vehicles that go through the main street in Muswellbrook.
Along with federal and state government funding, Council has also used $1 million of its own resources. Stage 3 will begin by mid-year.
And that'll be the roundabout, which is just through the subway, and that will take to and allow a free flow of traffic through from the police station, ambulance stations, also to our transport interchange, and also most importantly the high and wide loads on the main underpass, the bypass for our underpass.
The saving of the Mickey whale is the latest international issue to be tackled by Greenpeace. With 5 million members worldwide, the organisation has become a powerful tool in trying to stop the Japanese from killing off the near-extinct species. The same organisation is now at work in Newcastle, operating from a small office in Hamilton. Tanya Searle and scores of volunteers have been canvassing suburbs, signing up new members and finding out just what the local issues are.
In the Newcastle area, the council has been trying to establish an effective curbside collection recycling service, but in late